So just in terms of the programme that we're here to speak about this evening, so it's the Community Activities Fund, which is currently open for applications online, and it is online only. And again, it's for the Galway City administrative area. So again, just, you know, noting where many of you are from, again, you are all residing within or providing key services within the Galway City administrative area. So again, just to note that colleagues in Galway County Council currently have their programme open. So again, if as we go through this and if you feel that it's more appropriate and relevant for you to link in with our colleagues in Galway County Council, I'd advise you to check out their website, galway.ie, because information is available on their website. Moving on, again, it's our Community Activities Fund. I suppose it's interesting because quite a few of you have actually been in contact saying, is this running under the Community Enhancement Programme? So again, there is that familiarity built up with you. So again, that's very important, and that's something to note. But again, at the moment, as we've said, we're currently inviting applications for funding. And again, it's from interested and eligible community, voluntary groups, organisations or clubs, again, within the Galway City administrative area. In terms of the fund and in terms of previous programmes, Galway City Local Community Development Committee, from now on in, known as the LCDC, they will have the oversight and they will administer the fund on behalf of Galway City. And again, obviously, it's a very sizable fund. It's very, very welcome. So again, it's €264,910 that the LCDC have been allocated to administer and to deliver on for Galway City. Again, the aim of this fund is really to support our community groups, our organisations, which have continued to provide a vital community service during COVID-19. And as a result, they are impacted by COVID-19. And again, really, as we're coming in under the banner of the Community Enhancement Programme, again, there's a specific reference, focus and aim that, again, this is going to be targeted where possible and where needed in terms of facilities and groups in disadvantaged areas, or indeed working with disadvantaged communities across Galway City. Again, in terms of our LCDC, again, and I suppose this is important to note because while we don't have limits or caps on the amount of funding that can be sought, again, the department, and again, when we speak about the department, it's the Department of Rural and Community Development in this regard. Again, they have recommended that the LCDC would ring fence an amount of their allocation for small grants of €1,000 or less. And again, I suppose that's really not to deter the smaller groups who are looking for that little bit of a step up or a little bit of seed support to apply. So again, there is grants of €1,000 and then obviously hopefully some kind of medium-sized grants as well. Again, applications only online. Again, we're very strict on that, and again, that is required. Again, the link is there, and I'm hoping some of you will have looked at the online portal and indeed the application system in advance. And again, noting the closing date is Friday, the 4th of February at 4 p.m. Again, in terms of this and listening to the kind of introductions, again, commercial organisations and individuals on their own, they're not eligible to apply. Again, this is really focused at the community, the voluntary, the groups and clubs within the city. In terms of the actual fund itself then, again, I suppose the difference with the fund this year, and again, it is called a different thing, it's a Community Activities Fund, really a big focus and I suppose a big highlight of the fund this year is really going to seek and support current funding shortfalls that may be in place within the community and voluntary groups. So again, that's looking at the non-pay. So again, employment costs, salary costs, they are not eligible. So it's anything that is non-pay. So that's a running cost or an operating cost. And obviously the types of running costs that we all obviously have to incur: electricity, refuse, heating, fuel. It depends on the nature of your service, the nature of the support that you're providing across your community. But again, they are eligible costs under the fund. in addition to operating costs that you may have to incur in order to continue to deliver your service out to the community. And again, operating costs would be rental or lease costs, insurance bills, or you may have other eligible operating costs, and we're happy to have that conversation with you as well. But again, that's the broad definition of the non-pay focus of this particular program. In addition, or separately, again, groups can also use the funding to carry out any necessary repairs or improvements to the facilities, or indeed purchase items of equipment that you feel is needed. And again, that's very much dependent on the service and the supports that you deliver, and there's some examples there that are given. Again, obviously, within Galway City, we do have a local economic and community plan. Again, many of you will be involved in the delivering of that and will be aware of it. So again, we have included a link there for your information and for your review, because again, within that, there are a number of key priority areas identified, and obviously we would like to see applications for funding coming in and helping us collectively support the delivery of those priorities within our LECP as well. Obviously, like I've said, and again, this is all set out within the guidelines, which are linked in the online portal. So again, all of this information is there. But again, this is, I suppose, a non-exhaustive list of projects that could receive funding under the Community Activities Fund. So again, as we've mentioned, it could be some development works, or indeed some renovations of your community centre, your community space, your meeting room. Again, you may have a community amenity in your area. You may be seeking funding towards some repairs, maintenance, or improvements on that. Again, you may be looking at doing some development works in terms of your facilities. You may be looking at, doing some streetscaping work, developing, again, a play area in your local community. Continuing on, again, you may be looking at doing some remedial works in terms of energy efficiency. You may be looking at doing some upgrades to your building or to your facility, and also you may be looking at purchasing equipment. Again, like I mentioned earlier, the non-pay operating and running costs here. Again, so speaking to either the utility bills and the costs that you're facing or you've incurred, or indeed your operating costs. And I suppose the key thing and the very, very important thing here is that if you're applying for funding under the Community Activities Fund, and if you're applying for funding under the utility bills or the operating costs, there really is only a relevant period that can speak to. So again, the period that will speak to will be from the 1st of July last year up to the end of June this year. So again, obviously, and I wouldn't think anybody will, but I mean, you can't be applying for costs that are largely retrospective outside of that period. So again, that's the period of focus. And again, that is the key period when we speak about the utility bills and the operating costs. Obviously, when we've got areas that are eligible for funding, we also, have areas that are not eligible for funding. And again, I suppose these are areas that aren't within the ethos of the programme and as such are not eligible for funding. So again, as I said, again, it's non-pay. So again, employment costs and any costs associated with that, they're not eligible. And then, legal fees, project management fees, feasibility studies, again, they're not eligible costs. So again, I suppose bear that in mind when you're looking at your project or your proposal that you're putting forward for application, that again, bear in mind that there's no point including those costs because again, they are not eligible. In terms of the application, and again, just listening to many of you there, you'll be familiar with our online application process because, like I said, we've been fortunate enough to work with you and to fund many of you in the past. So again, the online application process, it's detailed, but it is designed in a way that, it's informative and I suppose, the questions are very clear. And also when you go to the online link and you start the application process, there is a list of the questions there in advance, so you can have a look at them and sort of see what's coming next. So you can be somewhat prepared for that online application. And also a list of or a link to the guidelines are also there. So again, you're sort of doing it in tandem, and you're sort of reminding yourself what's eligible, what's not, and so on. So again, you know, that's important to note. I would set aside some time to do the application. You'll have heard me say this before. I would not advise you to leave it till Friday the 4th. I wouldn't advise you to start contacting us on Friday the 4th with queries either. I mean, there's a lot of interest in this and it will be competitive. So again, it's very interesting. We've had a little bit of engagement with some groups already. So again, after this evening, I'd encourage you to go online, start having a look at the questions and start putting your proposal together. Again, only completed online applications can be considered. And again, a copy of the guidelines are available online. And again, they're there to assist you as you step yourself into that process. Again, online only, deadline there, Friday the 4th of February at 4 p.m. Again, any queries, email Elaine. Elaine is on the call. And again, a lot of you have been familiar in dealing with Angela, Elaine, Emma. So again, the girls are on the call, and they're there and they're available to assist at any stage. Moving on, or not. Apologies. So just moving on then. So again, in terms of programme requirements, and again, those who have been successful and funded by us in the past will know this. So again, I'm speaking to an audience of informed people here. Again, in terms of applications, again, quotations are a key part of the application process. And again, in terms of our procurement guidelines, again, we set out there what is required. So for example, if you're applying to carry out some work, some minor repairs, some improvements, purchasing equipment, anything that's going to cost up to 3,000, then you must include one written quote or estimate for that piece of work. Okay. Obviously, if you're looking to do a larger project or a bigger scale piece of work, and obviously if the cost is coming in between 3 and 25, you must seek a minimum of 3 written quotes. Now, we have worked with the sector in the past. We do appreciate that we're still within COVID. It may not always be easy to get the quotes, but you must seek them and you must provide the evidence that you've sought them. And again, if you're not sure on that, email or contact Elaine and we will go through that with you, because again, that is a practice that is in place. Again, when it comes to your utility bills, obviously you're not going to be seeking quotes, you're not going to be seeking estimates in that regard. So again, if you're coming in and you're applying under that particular category, obviously we are asking you to submit the previous 6-month bills. And again, obviously, as you can imagine, we need to have some estimate of costs there in terms of moving on to an assessment stage. And obviously then as we move through the process, if there are consent needed, again, you must ensure that all of the necessary consent, if needed and where applicable, are in place. And again, in terms of insurances, evidence of insurances may be required. And again, we work with you through that and through that at application or at approval stage if it's needed. Obviously, in terms of all of the groups, and again, just remembering who's on the call, again, you must have a bank account because again, all approved applications and obviously the funding, which is the key bit, will only be paid into a bank account. Again, moving on in terms of acknowledgements, again, obviously, like I mentioned, this funding is coming to Galway City through the LCDC from the Department of Rural and Community Development. So again, the big keynote there is in terms of the funding from their department. So again, just to acknowledge that and to note that, and again, we want to acknowledge and note it here this evening on the webinar. And also, I suppose we have worked with the sector in the past where, again, you know, if it's appropriate and where it's relevant, we will provide you with a small sign or a plaque because again, we appreciate there was a little bit of sort of cost involved in that, and maybe a little bit of confusion around logos and so on. So again, if that's applicable, and where it's relevant, we will work with you on that. But look at a minimum, we would ask that, if you're approved funding and you have a website or a newsletter or an information note, that you do obviously acknowledge that the funding has come from the department, Galway City Council and Galway City LCDC. Again, just in terms of the programme, match funding isn't a requirement, but again, obviously, if you're able to contribute some match funding to the project, you're welcome to do that. And obviously, if you're doing that, you must state clearly in your online application where your fund or where your match funding is coming from. The grant funding, and I've missed this, but this will be amended and it will be changed. The grant funding must be drawn down by the end of December 2022. Okay, so that's an important thing to note, and that will be amended on the slides that issue. So again, it's the end of December 2022. But again, we will be bringing that deadline date back a couple of weeks earlier, just to obviously facilitate our administration processes. And again, the ladies will work with you on that. And again, it will be outlined very clearly in your email of offer, hopefully, what that deadline and drawdown date is. Finally, in terms of things to note, evidence of expenditure. And again, I suppose this is just feedback that we're getting, from yourselves as we go through each programme. But it's very, very important. And I suppose we might be a little bit different to some other local authorities, but we will pay the fund in 2 instalments. Okay, and that's a real positive, and that's something to note. And that's something that the LCDC have brought into place. But there's still governance with that. Okay, so again, I just want to note that it's in 2 instalments. It's never paid fully up front. So again, it's on 2 instalments. But the balance is only paid on the submission of vouched expenditure. Okay, and again, if you're not sure what that is, contact one of the ladies, okay, because that is your invoice marked paid. That is a copy of your receipt. A bank statement must be retained as well. So again, many of you, who run a good show and run a tight ship, you'll have those practices in place. But again, that is required. And again, this is obviously it's public funding. Again, to note, and we've said this a couple of times, the operating and running costs that relate to that period, and that key period is the 1st of July last year up to the end of June this year. So that's the only period that's applicable for that particular operating and running cost. Again, grant funding must be drawn down by the end of December. I didn't change on the previous slide, apologies. So again, to note, it's the end of December. And again, it's online only, and that's the link. And again, once your online application is fully submitted, you will get an acknowledgement email, and that's very important that you get that and you kind of have that to hand as well. Just to note as well then, and again, many of you who are here have been involved and supporting us over the last number of years in terms of the community call. But again, just to note that the community call helpline still continues to operate, run through Galway City Council. And again, it's there to provide very practical support as we continue to live with and move through COVID-19. And again, the phone number is there, it's free phone, and again, dedicated email address. So again, just to note that. Also, as we have just come through Christmas and continue to move through the next couple of weeks, again, just to note the current government campaign in terms of it being RSVP. So again, it's just about us being a little bit more risk aware. And again, obviously reminding ourselves in terms of what we do, where we go, in terms of the risk, the symptoms, the venue and the people.